Every October, the Halloween spirit opened up behind my apartment. And every October, I would work as many hours as possible there. There was something awesome and unique working in a place that sells Halloween costumes, props, masks, and spooky galore. It was Halloween night, and you guessed it, I was working the night shift. I was too old to trick or treat, and the money was all that mattered to me at this point. We closed at 10 p.m., and I was doing my nightly checklist before I locked the place up. I was finishing counting the cash register when someone walked in. It was a man, and I sighed, hoping that they did not take too long. I wanted to get home and enjoy the copious amounts of horror movies that I had lined up. I welcomed him to the store and asked if he needed help finding anything. He shook his head no and made his way to the mask aisles. A few moments later, he came to the checkout counter with a mask, almost like one of those from the movie The Strangers, with the bag with holes for eyes on it. I asked him if he had any plans for Halloween, trying to be nice as I wrung him out. All he said was, "He'll be busy." I got a weird vibe from this, but handed the man his change and watched him leave the store. After I locked the store up, I drove home, jumped into my pajamas, and started the horror movie marathon, starting with, of course, the original Halloween. About an hour into the movie, there was a knock at my front door. Now, I live alone, no boyfriend, no dog to protect me, nothing. Yes, it was Halloween, but it was nearly midnight, so it almost surely wasn't trick-or-treaters. I looked out my peephole. Nothing. No one was there. I opened the door slightly. Across the street near some trees, I thought I saw someone standing in a white mask, just like the mask that guy bought earlier that night. I blinked, and then the person waved. I slammed the door shut and locked it. I looked at the window, but could not see the person anymore. I grabbed my cell phone and started texting my girlfriends. They all said to call the police, but what if I was wrong? What if it was just adrenaline? I was explaining this to my girlfriends when my living room window shattered. I screamed and ran over to my window. A huge brick was thrown through my window, and attached to it was a piece of paper that read, "Told you I was busy." I sprinted to my closet and grabbed my pepper spray, and then called the cops. They arrived 5 minutes later. They did a sweep of the area, but they did not find anything or anyone. They said they would take the brick down to the lab for prints, but doubted there would be any matches. One of the officers was kind enough to stay in an unmarked police car all night in front of my house to make sure that I was okay. This was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. I have no clue what that man wanted or what his motives were, and I'm sure that whoever bought the mask that night was the culprit. I now own my own gun and have a security system built into my apartment. You never know what kind of freaks will come out on Halloween night. Every Halloween, I'm the friend who is in charge of planning the party, a responsibility that I gladly accept. This year, I was going all out as usual. My front yard was decorated as a haunted cemetery. We had skeletons crawling all over the house. Inside was like walking through a haunted house, and I even hired a DJ for the music. I have a large friend group and was expecting over 30 people to attend. At 7 p.m., my wife and I gladly welcomed our guests, who were dressed in Harry Potter costumes, all the way to sexy nurses' costumes. The music was playing, the drinks were flowing, and we were having a great time. That's when the power to our entire house was shut off. In an instant, our house went black. Some people laughed, thinking it was a joke or a Halloween prank, but I grabbed my wife's wrist worriedly. This wasn't part of the party. I apologized to the guests, all of whom had their cell phones out as a source of light, and explained that I was going to check the breaker box. I didn't have a chance to. Suddenly, our entire house was flooded with blinding white lights. I'm not exaggerating. You had to close or squint your eyes, or otherwise you would have went blind. There was a panic rising in the house. What was the source of this light? Then there was a violent rumble. The house started to shake. I could hear the DJ equipment falling over, the tables and the picture frames all crashing down. Fear struck my heart as I figured that we were having a massive earthquake. But then, just as quickly as the lights and shaking had come, they stopped. It was dead silent. Then the lights came back on. The guests looked terrified. Many were crying. I tried to keep everyone calm and told them not to leave because I did not know if there would be any more shakes or if these lights would return. And what were those lights? That's when our front door burst down. Screams erupted through my house as men in suits came bursting in, guns drawn. They held up their badges, explaining that they were with the FBI. The head detective rounded us up and asked if we saw anything unusual happen. We all explained about the blinding lights and the violent shaking. The detective nodded his head and explained that we had nothing to worry about. Those lights and noises were just some malfunctions with the power plant that was down the street. I was not an idiot. I did not believe that explanation at all. The FBI continued to scan and search the house for another 30 minutes before they left. The head detective gave me his card and told me to give him a call if I began to notice anything strange around the area. Myself and the entire party all stared in disbelief as the units pulled off and drove away. I stared at the card the detective handed me. It said at the very bottom, "Unidentified Object Investigator." I truly believe whatever happened that Halloween night had nothing to do with a power plant. Whatever it was out of this world. It was Halloween night. It was almost midnight, which meant most of the kids in our area were already in bed, but not Nikki and me. We were labeled daredevils and sometimes even misfits, probably because sneaking into cemeteries after the town had gone to sleep was frowned upon, but we loved the adrenaline rush. We snuck out of our houses at 11:45 that Halloween night. Our houses were only a 5-minute walk from the town's local cemetery. Tonight's mission was to take a selfie with Mr. Graham Roberts' grave, the oldest tombstone in our small town, dating back to 1865. I was excited, and Nikki was too as we hopped over the cemetery gates. As we got closer to the grave, our excitement grew. The clout they would receive from friends and classmates when they saw the selfies made this adventure totally worth it. When we found the grave, we stood there in shock. We found the tombstone of Graham Roberts, but we did not expect to find the grave dug up. And I mean completely dug up. There was a huge hole in the ground, and it appeared that the coffin was missing. What the hell? I looked at Nikki, who had a terrified look on his face, and that's when we heard leaves crunching and footsteps approaching us. About 5 gravestones down, in the dull moonlight, there was about 5 figures moving quickly towards us. "Holy shit, we need to go," I said, and grabbed Nikki by the collar and dragged him away. We sprinted like our lives depended on it out of the cemetery, and not looking back once. We ran back to our houses, our hearts about to burst through our chests. We had no idea why the grave was dug up and who those figures were running after us. We decided not to tell anyone about it and went our separate ways. The next day, Nikki was over watching Halloween 4 with me when we flipped past the news. There was a big news story about local grave robbers in the county, and their latest hit had been the grave of Graham Roberts. Our jaws dropped. The news reports went on to say that the robbers had stolen items that were included in the coffin, which were a watch, spectacles, and a wedding ring. The estimated cost was to be in the tens of thousands. The body of Graham Roberts had still not been found, and the men are considered to be armed and dangerous. When the news report ended, we realized just how lucky we were to have escaped those grave robbers, because if they would have caught us, who knows what they would have done. I learned a very valuable lesson that night. Leave the dead alone. It's their resting place, especially on Halloween night.